Nobody prepared you for this part. The beginning of separation, as brutal as it was, had a kind of intensity to it. There was something to fight, something to grieve loudly. The shock of it, the reaching, the not understanding, the nights that felt like free fall. There was a texture to that pain that, looking back, at least felt like something real was happening. At least felt alive in its own terrible way. And there were people around you who could see it, who could recognize the rawness of someone in the early stages of loss and respond accordingly, who brought you things, who checked in, who let you talk about it until the words ran dry. That stage, as hard as it was, had company. This stage does not. This stage is quieter. And that quietness is its own particular kind of suffering that nobody who has not been in it can quite understand from the outside. Because from the outside, this stage looks like you are fine. You are not crying the way you were. You are not reaching for your phone the way you were. You are not visibly falling apart. You have built a life around this that functions. You get up. You show up. You move through your days with a competence that looks, to everyone watching, like you have healed or moved on or arrived at some version of peace. And you have done some of that work. That is real. You are not the same person who was in free fall, but there is something happening underneath the functioning that nobody sees and nobody asks about. A specific kind of loneliness that is not about missing him. Not exactly. Not in the way you used to miss him. Something more interior than that, or layered. More to do with the particular experience of being this far into a journey that most of the world does not believe in, with no map for this specific terrain, with nobody in your immediate life who understands what the stage actually is, and with the dawning awareness that you have done enough work to see clearly but not yet enough to be done. That is where you are right now. If that is where you are, leave a like and subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. Drop. I am further than I look in the comments. Because the final stage of separation has a name and a shape and an explanation, and understanding what you are actually in right now changes how you hold it. Before we go any further, there is something I need to put in front of you. Because if you are in the final stage, you have been in this long enough to know that general content is not what serves you anymore. You have already read the articles and watched the videos that explain separation. What you need now is something built specifically for your journey, your chart, your soul contract with this person, and the specific timing of what the universe is building in the space between you. A twin flame union personal reading goes directly into the energetic and karmic architecture of your connection. Your name, your date of birth, your time of birth, your place of birth. Those coordinates become the foundation of a reading mapped entirely to you, not to a general situation that could be anyone's. What you receive is a personal audio reading delivered straight to your inbox and a detailed written report that tells you where you are in your journey from the energetic level, what the universe is currently orchestrating in your specific connection, and what your soul contract with him actually contains beneath everything either of you can see from inside it. You have been doing the work without a clear map. This is your map. The link is in the description. Now, let us go into what this final stage actually is and why it is the one nobody warned you about. There is a reason this stage catches people off guard. The earlier stages of separation have recognizable features. There is the shock of the initial pull away. The protest phase, where everything in you mobilizes against the distance and you are doing everything you can to close it. The bargaining, the reaching, the moments of contact, and the crashes that follow when those moments do not produce what you were hoping for. The grief that arrives when the reaching finally starts to exhaust itself. The beginning of the inner work. The first real moments of turning toward yourself instead of toward him. All of those stages are documented in the spiritual community. There is content for them. There are people who have been there who can recognize where you are and speak to it. There are frameworks and explanations and communities built around the experience of being in separation. But the final stage is something different. The final stage is when you have done enough work that the acute pain has lifted, when the nervous system has settled out of its long emergency, when you have found your footing in your own life and your own sense of self in a way that would have been impossible 18 months ago. when you are no longer organizing your days around him, and you are no longer reaching from that hollow, desperate place, and you have, genuinely, built something real inside yourself that was not there before. And it is lonely in a way that is harder to explain than the earlier loneliness, because the earlier loneliness was loud. This one is quiet. This one lives in the space between who you were before this journey and who you are becoming, in the gap between the self that has been broken down and the self that has not yet fully arrived. In the particular experience of being too transformed for your old life and not yet arrived at your new one. Nobody warns you that you can be further than you have ever been and still feel more alone than you expected to feel at this point. There is something specific that the final stage of separation tends to surface, that the earlier stages, in their louder pain, often kept buried. The wound of not being seen in the way you most need to be seen. This is a wound that almost everyone who ends up in a twin flame journey is carrying, often without fully knowing it. It usually has its origins far earlier than this connection, and the formative years when a child learns, the repeated experience, what it means to have your interior world be visible or invisible to the people who matter most to you. Children whose interior world was consistently seen, named, and responded to by caregivers develop what developmental psychologists call object constancy, the deeply embodied knowing that you are real and your experience is real, and what happens inside you matters, regardless of whether it is currently being witnessed by anyone else. Children whose interior world was consistently unseen, misread, or responded to with distance, correction, or dismissal develop something different. They develop the pattern of needing external witnessing to feel that their experience is real, of organizing their sense of self around whether the people in their environment are responding to them, of feeling, in moments of genuine invisibility, something closer to dissolution than just loneliness. Something that says, if nobody can see this, does it actually exist? You are in a stage right now where that wound is active, not because the journey has failed, because you have arrived at a point of genuine interior development that requires a witness to feel fully real, and the witness you have been building this entire journey around is not available in the way you need right now. And the people in your daily life, even the ones who love you, do not have the language for what you are in. They can see that you seem okay. They cannot see what being okay in this specific stage is actually costing you, or what it actually contains, or how different this quiet loneliness is from ordinary loneliness. And because they cannot see it, something in you that learned very early that unseen experience might not be fully real starts to wonder, in the quieter hours, whether what you are going through is actually as significant as it feels. Whether you are being dramatic, whether you should be further along than this by now. That doubt is not wisdom. That doubt is the inner child wound doing what it learned to do decades before this journey began, and it is worth pausing here on what that wound actually is, underneath the way it presents in this stage. Because most people who carry the not being seen wound do not experience it as a wound. They experience it as a question about reality, as a low and recurring uncertainty about whether what is happening inside them is actually as significant as it feels, or whether they are somehow making it up, or exaggerating, or needing something they are not entitled to need. The wound wears the face of doubt rather than grief. It says, you are probably being too much. You are probably imagining the depth of this. You should be further along by now. This is the form the wound takes in people who learned early that visibility had a cost, because the child who was met with distance or correction when they brought their full interior experience to the people they depended on did not learn that their experience was invalid. They learned something more insidious than that. They learned to be the one who invalidated it first, to preempt the dismissal by dismissing themselves first before anyone else could do it. To stay small enough that the gap between what they felt and what the environment could hold never became visible enough to be painful. That survival strategy worked in the environment it was built for. In the final stage of a twin flame journey, in the specific loneliness of being more transformed than the world around you can see, that same strategy is the thing that makes the loneliness harder to bear than it needs to be. because the preemptive act of dismissing yourself compounds the invisibility. You are already invisible to most of the people around you in this stage. And then the wound adds its own layer of invisibility, making you invisible to yourself. Here is the thing about arriving at the final stage that nobody puts in a caption or a short video. The people in your life who were supportive in the early stages often have a quiet timeline for your journey that does not match the actual timeline of what you are in. Unconsciously, without meaning any harm, the people who love you extended their support through what they understood as the acute phase of your grief. And when that acute phase visibly subsided, something in them relaxed. They stopped asking. They stopped bringing it up. Not because they stopped caring, but because from where they are standing, you seem to be doing well, and doing well tends to mean the crisis has passed. What they do not know is that the crisis passing is not the same as the journey being over. What they do not know is that this specific stage, the one where you are doing well and the acute pain has lifted and you are functioning, this is in some ways the most interior and demanding work of the entire journey, because now you cannot rely on the momentum of acute suffering to carry you through your days. Now you have to choose, consciously and deliberately in the absence of crisis, to continue doing the work, to continue facing the things in yourself that this journey surfaced, to continue building the interior life that this connection has been demanding of you without the external urgency that made that building feel imperative in the earlier stages. The early stages had an energy of necessity to them. You had to do the work or you would fall apart. The final stage requires something that is harder in its own way, choosing to do the work when you are no longer in pieces. Choosing to stay with the interior transformation when staying with it does not feel urgent. Choosing to keep becoming the person this journey has been building toward, even when the people around you can no longer see that the building is still happening. That choosing, done in private, in the quiet of a life that looks fine from the outside, is one of the most spiritually mature things a person can do. And it is lonely in a way that deserves to be named. There is a concept in developmental psychology called the separation-individuation process, first mapped by Margaret Mahler in her work on early childhood development, that illuminates what is happening in you at this stage with surprising precision. In early childhood development, there is a phase where the child has differentiated enough from the primary caregiver to begin moving out into the world independently, but has not yet developed enough internal stability to feel fully safe doing so without constant reference back to the caregiver as a secure base. Mahler called this the rapprochement subphase. It is characterized by a particular kind of push and pull in the child, a drive toward autonomy and exploration, paired with a recurring need to return to the caregiver for refueling, for reassurance, for the emotional recharge that comes from being seen and held by the person who represents safety. The child in rapprochement is not in crisis. The child is developing, but the development feels uncertain in a way that the earlier, more protected stage did not. Because the earlier stage had the caregiver close, this stage requires the child to venture further out into more unfamiliar territory, with a developing but not yet complete internal capacity to regulate on its own in the absence of external support. You are in the psychological equivalent of rapprochement right now. You have differentiated enough from the earlier version of yourself that you cannot go back to who you were before this journey. That self has dissolved. But you have not yet fully arrived at the new self that this journey has been building. You are in the developmental gap between the two, further than you have ever been from the old you. Not yet fully inhabiting the new one. And the particular loneliness of rapprochement is that you have moved far enough from the familiar, that the familiar no longer holds you, but the unfamiliar does not yet feel like home. This is not failure. This is a developmental process proceeding exactly as developmental processes do. The rapprochement subphase is temporary, not because the child gives up and retreats to the caregiver permanently, and not because the child suppresses the need for refueling and pushes through without it. It resolves when the child develops enough internal structure, enough of what psychologists call object constancy, to carry the secure base inside rather than needing it to be physically present at all times. You are developing that internal structure right now, in the quiet that nobody sees, and the choosing to continue when the urgency has passed. In the hours when you do not know if what you are building is real, or whether the journey is real, or whether you are further along than you feel, and you continue anyway. That continuation and the absence of external confirmation is the specific developmental work of this stage. It is how object constancy is built not in childhood but in spiritual maturity, through exactly the experience you are in right now. The Twin Flame Journey Tracker and Progress Workbook was built for this stage specifically, not for the early stages where the pain is so loud that just making it through a day feels like the whole of the work. For this stage, the quiet one, the one where the work is continuing but the evidence of it is interior and dispersed and not always visible even to yourself. 39 pages of concrete structure. An 8-stage journey map that shows you exactly where you are based on actual behavioral and emotional markers, not on how good or bad a particular day feels. A synchronicity log that takes the signs that keep arriving, the ones you notice and then lose track of in the ordinary texture of your week, and gives them a place to live that is not just your memory. A daily self-love checklist that keeps you the center of your own story on the days when the pull to organize everything around him would be easier than organizing it around yourself. Weekly reflection pages that surface the patterns you cannot see from inside them. Monthly reviews that show you in documented form how far you have actually traveled. Not how far you feel you have traveled, how far you have actually gone. This is not another workbook full of concepts you have already read. It is a tracking system for a journey that is real and ongoing and deserves to be documented with the same seriousness that the journey itself has demanded of you. The link is in the description. Here is what most content about twin flame separation does not say about the loneliness of the final stage. It is functional. Not in the sense that it feels good or that you are supposed to be grateful for it in some spiritual bypassing way. In the sense that it is doing something specific inside you that nothing else in this journey could have done quite the same way. The aloneness of the final stage is where object constancy actually builds, where the interior secure base stops being theoretical and becomes embodied, where you discover, through the living of it, that your experience is real, and your transformation is real, and your journey is real regardless of whether anyone around you can see it clearly. Regardless of whether he is present or absent, regardless of whether the outer world has caught up to what is happening in the interior, you are learning, in the most direct possible way, that you do not need the witness to make the experience real. That lesson cannot be taught in the earlier stages. It can only be learned here, in the quiet, and the functioning that looks fine from the outside and contains something enormous on the inside. In the private, ongoing choosing to continue a journey that nobody around you fully understands anymore. Peter Bloss, whose work extended Mahler's separation individuation framework into adolescent development, described a parallel process he observed in teenagers navigating their second individuation. The developmental work of separating from the internalized parental representations carried from childhood. Blows noted that the adolescent in this process often experiences a period of heightened isolation and internal sufficiency that looks from the outside like withdrawal or distance, but is from the inside a necessary turning toward the self in order to consolidate what has been developing over the previous years. He called this the adolescent's love affair with the self. Not narcissism, not selfishness. The developmentally necessary period of learning to be your own secure base before you can bring yourself fully into genuine intimacy with another person. You are in the adult, spiritually inflected version of that process right now. The love affair with the self that the final stage of separation demands is not comfortable. It is not always what you would choose, but it is what is happening, and it is building something in you that will change everything about how you enter the next chapter. Whether that next chapter is with him or into the version of yourself that the union is ultimately designed to create. There is a concept in trauma and attachment therapy called reparenting, the process by which an adult, through conscious and sustained inner work, begins to give to themselves the specific things their early caregiving environment failed to consistently provide. For someone carrying the wound of not being seen, reparenting means learning to witness yourself, to take your own interior experience seriously, to respond to your own states with the consistency and attunement that your early environment could not sustain, to hold your own grief, your own longing, your own uncertainty, your own developmental needs with the kind of steady, accepting presence that a secure early attachment would have provided. The final stage of separation is one of the primary locations where this reparenting happens. Because the external witnessing has gone quiet and the acute urgency has passed and the world has largely moved on from the visible phase of your crisis, you are left in the exact conditions that reparenting requires. Conditions that force you to become your own witness, to validate your own experience without waiting for someone else to confirm that it is real, to trust your own sense of where you are without needing the outer world to reflect it back to you. This is what developmental psychologists call earned secure attachment. The research on earned secure attachment, much of which comes from the longitudinal work of Mary Main and her colleagues at Berkeley, shows something that is both sobering and genuinely hopeful. Adults who did not have secure early attachments can develop what researchers call earned security, a form of secure attachment that is functionally indistinguishable from the kind built in childhood. The difference is that earned security does not come from having had a secure childhood. It comes from sustained, conscious engagement with the stories and patterns and wounds of an insecure one. From the kind of inner work that this journey has been demanding of you since the beginning, earned secure attachment is built exactly where you are, in the final stage, in the quiet, in the choosing to continue when nobody is watching, in the witnessing of yourself through a process that the world around you has largely stopped being able to see clearly. You are building earned security in the dark, and what that produces when the next phase arrives is not just healing. It is the capacity for a depth of genuine intimacy that people who never had to build it this way often cannot access, because they never had to go this far inside to find the foundation. He is not in the final stage. This is worth naming directly because the loneliness of your stage is compounded by the awareness, somewhere underneath everything, that you are not in the same place in this journey as he is, that you have done work he has not done yet, that you can see things he cannot see yet, that the gap between where you are and where he is has not closed in the way you might have hoped it would by now. He is likely somewhere in the middle stages, and the particular form of not knowing that characterizes a person who is running from something they do not have language for. In the low, persistent ache that surfaces when genuine connection has been suppressed for long enough that the suppression itself starts to feel unsustainable. In the quiet war between the part of him that wants to close the distance and the part that has been running from genuine intimacy for so long that the closing feels more dangerous than the ache. His journey has its own timeline that you cannot control and cannot accelerate. And one of the harder things about the final stage is the grief that comes with seeing clearly. Because you have done enough work now that you can see the pattern underneath his behavior. You can see the wound that drives the distance. You can understand with a depth that would not have been possible 18 months ago exactly what he is running from and why the running makes psychological sense even as it costs him everything. You can hold his complexity with a kind of compassion that does not collapse into making excuses for him, that simply understands the architecture of the wound underneath the behavior. That seeing is a form of love that he does not know you are carrying. And it can be lonely to love someone with that level of clarity when the clarity is not yet mutual. When you can see the shape of what this is and he is still inside the pattern without the perspective to see it from the outside. When the work you have done has brought you to a place where union feels genuinely possible as a lived experience, not just a concept, and he has not yet arrived at the internal architecture that would allow him to sustain it. But here's what is true about the way a twin flame connection actually works. The internal development happening in you is not isolated from him. The field between twin flames is not a metaphor. It is a description of something that functions, however imprecisely understood, as a genuine connective tissue between two people who share a soul-level bond. The quality of your interior state travels through that field, not as a strategic signal that you are sending, as the natural consequence of what you have built inside yourself. When you develop object constancy in yourself, it registers in the field as a different quality of presence than what you were carrying 18 months ago. When you build a secure internal base, the energetic signature of what you are offering changes. He cannot articulate this. He is not consciously tracking it, but something in him, the part that has always recognized you beneath the level of choice and reason and managed distance. That part is receiving the information that something in you has fundamentally changed. His process is reading your completion. And while you cannot know exactly when his own readiness will arrive, what you can know with certainty is that the person who meets him in the next chapter will be genuinely different from the person who was in freefall at the beginning of this journey. And that difference matters more to what is possible between you than any amount of reaching or strategic distance ever could. His journey has its own timeline that you cannot control and cannot accelerate. What you can do and what you are doing in the final stage, whether you consciously frame it this way or not, is become the person whose interior stability creates the conditions for his arrival. Not by pulling him, not by being what you think he needs you to be, but by completing your own developmental work so thoroughly that when the timing shifts, when his process catches up to yours, there is something genuinely new here for him to meet. Your final stage is not separate from his process. It is part of it. What you are completing in yourself is doing something in the space between you that you cannot track and he cannot articulate, and that is nevertheless real and moving and building towards something neither of you can quite see yet from inside it. Not more work in the striving sense, not more trying to get somewhere. The final stage asks something simpler and harder than that. It asks you to stop treating your own experience as a problem to be solved. The loneliness of this stage is real. The invisibility of what you are going through is real. The particular exhaustion of being further than you look, more transformed than anyone around you can see, closer to something significant than you have any external evidence to confirm, that is real, and it deserves to be held with the same seriousness that you would hold it if it were happening to someone you love deeply. What would you tell her? The woman who came to you and said, "I have been in this journey for a long time and I have done the work and the acute pain has lifted and I am functioning, and somehow that functioning is the loneliest it has ever been. I do not know if I am almost there or still far away. I do not know if I am healing or just getting better at carrying this. I do not know if the quiet means something good is coming or just that the noise has stopped." You would not tell her to push harder. You would not tell her to be further along by now. You would not offer her a timeline or a technique or a reason why she should stop feeling what she is feeling. You would see her. You would tell her that being this far in is not nothing. That the quiet loneliness of the final stage is not the same as being stuck. That functioning well in the middle of an interior process nobody can see is one of the hardest things a person can do. That the fact that she has arrived here at this particular loneliness means she has come further than she can see from inside the experience. You would tell her that what she is building in the dark is real. Do that for yourself today, not as a concept, as an actual practice. In the specific moment when the doubt surfaces and the inner child wound says, "If nobody can see this, maybe it is not as real as it feels." Counter it not with a list of evidence, but with the thing the wound was always asking for. See yourself. There is a difference between the loneliness that is empty and the loneliness that is full. Empty loneliness is the loneliness of someone whose interior is hollow, who has not done the work, who is running from themselves and finding that the running produces a particular and increasingly unbearable solitude. Full loneliness is what you are in. It is the loneliness of a person who has done enough inner work that their interior life has become genuinely rich and complex and real, who has arrived at a depth of self that most people around them have not been asked to develop, Who is carrying something significant in a world that is mostly not equipped to hold it with them? Full loneliness is not a sign that something has gone wrong. It is a sign that something has gone deep, and what goes deep does not stay invisible forever. The interior work you are doing is not sealed inside you with no exit point. It is building something that will change how you show up in every room you enter, every conversation you have, every moment of genuine connection that the next chapter will contain. The woman who comes through the final stage of separation is not the woman who went into it. She has earned something that cannot be taught or explained from the outside, something that only comes from having gone all the way through. That is you, right now, in the quiet that nobody sees, in the choosing to continue, and the loving yourself through a stage of a journey that the world around you has largely stopped asking about. The loneliness is real. So is what it is building. You are closer than you know.